implementation for WHO, which is rolling out on Friday, which became much bigger than we had expected, but it's getting along. But what we have done is to separate out the designer so that it's a properly reusable component. And it's been a bit of a disentanglement effort in making it possible then to reuse it without all of the network elements and so on. But technically that's working okay. So what the main part that's remaining on the designer part is to agree on what extension mechanisms we need and how to get hold of the library data or the concepts and so on from OpenMRS. And again, that part is something that we will have to rely on you guys to do. But what we're setting up is a setup where you can basically define the source of those elements yourself as a library, and then just drag and drop things directly into the user interface. So how we're achieving this is by defining what we call a profile on the designer, so that the designer can be customized to the needs that you have. And I can quickly show on screen now. Just give me 2 seconds. Just share here. This one, I believe. Yeah. Let's just make it smaller so we don't use all of the bandwidth for nothing. Yeah. So what I've thought of is that so far is that for all elements in the form, you can have an extension, and we can define possible extensions at every level of the form and make them different for different types of elements. So you can see here, this profile is for everything, for all type elements. And here you can see that there is an extensions part where I basically defined that all elements that are created using this profile will have the following 3 additional properties to all elements. And with properties, I'm referring to. Let me just open up that for you. I'm just going to switch. Hold on. With extensions, I'm meaning then that under additional properties here, we will get a separate header here that says extensions, and under extensions, you will then have these 3 properties for basically any type of element that you click on, and that the 3 here will be the first one will be a number, but this could be customized, I mean, as we move on. I'm just talking from a general perspective, and then we'll have to get into details of how you actually want this to work. But where we could say that, well, this external ID is a number, and the data key, meaning the property name of the node, for example, the form or the page or this question here, would be extensions.id, or it could be some other property name that you define it to be. Reason or benefit of calling it extensions.id is that then you could use any wording that you want, and we know it doesn't interfere with any other properties that are already in use. But we could come up with a scheme where you know what properties you can't use and thereby use that. And then this one here, title, external ID. So that would mean, for example, here, so if this one was the external ID, it would say external ID here, and you would have a field here for entering a number. And then the same here, external description. Here, I've said key implicit. The idea there is that if you don't provide a data key like this, what it would do is that it would take the name of the extra property and basically call it or make data key extensions dot external description just like it is. And here you can see another one for a date. I'm not sure if that's relevant even, but I was just showing it as a means of showing extensibility. So in one way, the effect of that is that the designer then can take arbitrary additional properties for different element types. And as you can see down here, you can see here that this is another piece of the profile that only relates to types of form. And here we could call this, for example, for single selects or for other types that they have their own.
Jörn?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Are you showing something?
Oops, sorry. It went off.
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me earlier?
I wasn't sure what you were showing. So
here you go. Now it's better.
Yeah.
So, so here are the three extensions that I was talking about. Each of them has a type, and each of them have a data key. It's not mandatory. You can see down here that this one, I just made a comment that the key is implicit. Basically, that means that it takes the extension name and prefixes it with extensions dot, and then that's the key that it expects to find that value on, if it is, or save it on. And the idea with this is that any data that comes from the client then would contain this extra information as part of the data. And thereby you have the possibility of making extension mechanisms. And then you can see down here that there is another profile thing called library with a source. That part I'm not exactly sure whether we should call it source or use a URL, or if it's something that you will yourself bake into the system. Because currently it's very simple to include the designer into another HTML web page. So you could potentially just create that listing yourself and then just drag and drop things over. Yeah.
So, Jon, I have a question here. So, if we want to pull the concepts and from OpenMR side, and usually it requires the login. So, where are we going to
Yes.
in which step we go to log in?
Yeah. So let me actually. I'm just going to make a very basic paint drawing, just so we have the same understanding of how this would work. So I'm just going to share the paint window. Hold on. Here. So if you say that the current designer is this one here. And then we add a library component on the side on a separate web page, like this. So what what we've done is that we've stripped out everything that has to do with network connectivity in here. So anything that has to do with network connectivity here has been removed. So the designer now is the designer that just basically where you can tell it, give it a JSON document, and it will load the view of the form in the designer, and you can have a callback when you want it to save it. And the aim with that is that you could create your own HTML page with the login and everything that would retrieve the form where you stored it, retrieve it, and then load it into the designer. And you would then also at the same time render up the library that would be over here, using the same drag and drop component as we have in the designer today. And thereby you will, the designer is basically only a library component that just does the design. So you give it a JSON with the form definition, and you get back a JSON with the form definition. Plus you have the library on the side that where you load and where you can make search functions and whatever for concepts and so on from OpenMRS, and you can basically drop them over into the designer. The designer would then receive the information with this extension information, the concept ID and whatever you want it to have, and it would store that as part of the extension mechanism that I just described. And then similarly in runtime, when you then want to show this form, then you have the mUzima app. Let's call this let's call it the red here. So, and you of course have your login and everything. It works. You load up something, and then when you want to show the actual form, you initiate or instantiate the form viewer, which doesn't have any network connectivity or anything. The only thing it needs is the JSON that you created over here. Sorry. So the JSON that was created here is what you would just give the form runner in the mUzima app, and it would load the form you could also provide it with data at the same time, so it would show existing data. That would just be two different JSON documents that you would provide. And then once it's done, the control goes back to the mUzima app, and your the Zegeba form viewer just closes down, and you continue the mUzima as you would normally. So it's not a standalone app or anything. It's just a component that you integrate into mUzima, and you instantiate it with a simple JavaScript call that would include the JSON for the form definition and the JSON for data if you have any data, and some callbacks to so that the runner can inform the mUzima app of, for example, autosaving or completion or error handlings and so on.
Okay.
So what I think this part here on the client side, the mUzima app, is fairly straightforward. I said fairly because you've done the integration earlier with I can't recall the name of the component, but the Xforms thingy. But the challenge is much more on the designer, in that you would then need to make a wrapper application that would handle the communication back to OpenMRS, get the concept IDs, make it searchable, for example, and then generate up the lists for dragging it into the application. So the list itself is easy to implement, but the challenge is actually that you need to have a way of searching and filtering the data that you need, or the concepts that you want to get from OpenMRS. So I'm not sure how what your plans are for doing that. And the silence was stunning.
So Martin has a question on the chat, asking how can we to get away from having more than one viewer to view the mUzima form on the mUzima side, so that like for example, I know that when we were on the OpenMRS side, and when we view info platform is one way, and then when we view the HTML form is another way, when we view the X form is another way. So is there a way that all these form viewer, just because they build with different technology, they just still be viewed in the same way?
Okay, so technically there should. I don't see any reason why you can't create a OpenMRS form viewer, not in the app. That basically does the exact same thing. So what it does is that it connects to the OpenMRS server, gets the data in a JSON format, and then displays it in the runner. But then if that's your aim, then it might be better to implement a plugin on the Zegeba server component and use that, so that how should I explain it? Because then you're no longer going through the app, the mUzima app, but you basically want to have a service on the server side that allows you to open up a OpenMRS form using Zegeba forms, but without having to. And with the approach that we're now taking, where you basically design the forms for the mUzima app, running the same forms online with a small plugin for the server side would probably be the easiest approach, because then you're basically reusing all of the work that we have ongoing and using the runner. But what we would have to implement is a server component that basically gets the forms from wherever you've stored them and then loads data from OpenMRS and converts that into a JSON format.
Okay.
So John, are you suggesting kind of a way of bypassing the mUzima app for the other forms, or in case of multiple forms?
I'm not saying bypassing. I'm saying as an alternative. So say that you have a form so you have the mUzima app and you have all of the forms there, but you also want to show the same forms on the web. So in a regular browser, but not offline as the app. But technically, that's no problem to implement. We need to implement a plugin on the server side that makes the connection between the OpenMRS backend and the Zegeba form viewer that we already use, and thereby open up the same form online without using the info path or any of that part.
Okay. Yeah, I think it might save some time, right?
Yeah, at least you don't need to make both InfoPath forms and mUzima forms.
Yeah, I agree.
But again, I assume that there is some work that needs to be done on the yeah, so Remy had a question here.
It was mostly for Martin, because I think that's what he was asking about, if you can design forms in Zegeba and then render them using the current mUzima app or equivalent. I just wanted to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing.
Okay, I understood it as if he meant that instead of using InfoPath on the server side, that you could use the same forms also online, but not through the mUzima app.
I think it's for apply to both. So I think what Martin is trying to say is that when creating mUzima form by using different technology, in this case using Zegeba form designer, we want to make sure that the form is being viewed the same way as the current mUzima form being displayed on the mUzima app, as well as on the web app side, on the OpenMRS side. It's the same way that we don't need to go through, a different viewer in order to see that form. So yeah, so it's pretty much applied to both. Yeah, sorry about that.
But just to be clear, this definitely increases both the scope and the complexity of what we're talking about. And
so like on the how about if we want to make sure that it view the same way on the app side? Is it like an extra work for that, or?
No, so the form runner, the form viewer, is works the same whether you're showing it in an app or web. It doesn't matter. What matters is though that in the app, mUzima, the mUzima app, fetches the forms wherever you stored it, and displays the, and then just loads the form runner and shows the form and gets some data back in JSON. If you want to use the same technology online as well, you could. There's two alternatives. One is to create a basic service on the server that gets hold of the form definition and any data, and then just loads up that as a form. Technically, that's what we already do for our implementations. But it would have to be implemented. I mean, we're not OpenMRS experts or anything, so but I don't see any reasons why that shouldn't work.
I think maybe for the first pass, we can focus on making sure that it's the same way to view on the app side. I think on the web app, on the mUzima web app, mUzima app side, I think on the OpenMRS side, I think right now probably it's not really like a high priority. If it requires extra work.
Yeah, but technically it's no problem to implement that later. Just so that's, okay. I think that's maybe the key message. Yeah. So what for the next steps, what I would like you guys to work on is if going back to our drawing board here, it's the piece that would connect to OpenMRS and list out the concepts and the structures and so on. It could be as simple as just a text listing, whatever. Just for now, just get something that lists, that you know can get hold of some displayable name for a concept and the information in the concept, and just prints that out in a list. Because then as long as you can do that and get hold of that information, doing the next step of making that into a usable library is a very small piece. However, you probably want to implement that as some kind of a paged navigation search type of structure, because loading all of the concepts directly from OpenMRS and all of the forms and all of that will probably take quite a lot of network bandwidth. So yeah.
So you are suggesting that some kind of paging mechanism or tree-type hierarchy for the OpenMRS concept library, so it can be loaded kind of efficiently.
Yes, because as long as you can get hold of that into the client, and you could, if you, for example, use the built-in list structures of HTML. Hold on, let me just show you how it's actually generated in the designer today. Hold on. So I'm going to take this element here. Here you can see that it uses the standard OL and LI elements of a for each of the elements you can see here. So this is here, it's a page node, and this is another one, and this is another one. If I now, so if you could manage to just list up all of the the nodes that you have in OpenMRS using something like this, then it's extremely simple for us to just add on the drag and drop functionality from that and drag things in. So you can see here again that here is then the sub list of this again. You see here? So the graphical user interface is really, it's basically list items and list groups. So OL and LI standard HTML elements. So if you could manage to create your structure that you want to allow users to drag into the designer using this type of structure, then it's extremely simple for us to implement that.
Okay, I understand.
Because then it's just a separate div that we just put on the side into the designer, and it lives in its own. It does all of the things that it needs to do, and the connection between the two is just a drag and drop event. And setting that up is a matter of implementing some libraries, and so it's an easy task. But the challenging part is listing up those variables or the nodes that you want to drag in, because from my understanding, you want to be able to drag in individual concepts or even complete forms directly into the designer, so you can make the refinements on it there.
Okay.
But I might be mistaken, so yeah.
So I have a question, just so that we're on the same page. Would it be possible for anyone from the mUzima side to kind of try and describe the end product? Like, what's the goal of this? Like, at least in the initial stage. Like, say that, like from what Jørn said, that we'll be able to provide you with a designer that will produce some JSON structure, and from there, where does that go? Like, what are you guys envisioning? Because I have a feeling that we might be not on the same page as far as what the end goal is there.
Yeah, sure. I can try, and then maybe Simon can chime in. So I think we need to have like a form designer that it have all the OpenMRS concept, as well as the attributes like patient identifier type, and then person attribute types, all those metadata that is on the form designer parts that is easy for us to drag and drop on the designer. And also to include, maybe some rules and validations as well. And then when it's saved, it saved into maybe the JSON format into mUzima parts that to display as a mUzima form. That's pretty much, I think, what we really need, what envision that we need. I think what Jørn walked through, I think, is pretty much is what what I see. This is something that we find it helpful for our side. So the goal is to avoid to remove the responsibility from the developers that who need to write the HTML code, JavaScript and all those things, but to have someone with doesn't need to require the technical skill, but they understand the data collection form and data structures to use this designer tool that they can design the form. that's pretty much how we envision that we will need a tool like that for outside.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
So, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, and if you need that help, right, like how is that flow working? I think Simon prepared a PowerPoint once, and it has some information there. Or even if you need that anytime, I think Simon can prepare a flowchart type thing for you to show how it's working.
Okay. Okay. So my main concern is regarding like how will this form be displayed, because I think we've touched on possibly three ways of doing it. Like one is using, like you can use our current runner, is what we call it, the component that basically renders a form based on a JSON structure, and that can be included in either a web page or in an app in a web container. And then the alternative is to use, and then the other alternative is to use what you guys currently use to render your forms, in which case we would translate the JSON structure from the designer into the format that you guys have today. But then that would be limited to the functionality in terms of validations and whatnot that is in your form renderer. And then I guess the third option is to have some hybrid where you either have one on the web and one on the client, or like a mix, basically. So that's kind of where I'm slightly confused as to what the goal is. Because if the goal is to use your current mUzima renderer for displaying the forms, then that's slightly different than using our technology, in which case you don't have to transcode or translate the JSON in any way, but then you guys would have to run a web view.
I don't think, I mean, the aim was to use both the designer Zegeba and the runner Zegeba as a component in the mUzima app.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And that's
just to fill in on the other form runners, the thing is that in OpenMRS, the same forms are available also through InfoPath or an Xform module or some other HTML module. And so what they want to avoid is to having to design the same form both for using Zegeba for the mUzima app and separately using InfoPath or the Xforms module or the HTML module to create the same forms for the OpenMRS online part.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Can
Martin, you need to be loud.
I'm not sure what Martin means by we also want to avoid having mUzima use multiple renderers for different types of forms. Is that different? I think Simon or...
So what he's suggesting, like he's looking for something like some kind of unifier. So when mUzima has different types of forms, and he wants the form creation process and the handling process just following the same path rather than like different process for different types of forms.
Yeah. No, the process would be the same. So yeah.
Martin, have I understood you correctly?
you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
So I'm not as worried about how the forms are created. So some forms will be created natively, the way we are creating ours in the traditional way. Some forms will be created by Zegeba. What I don't want is on the mUzima side to have one renderer for mUzima forms, another renderer for Zegeba forms. What I was hoping is if we could just have one renderer, regardless of where the form is coming from. It just seems like an easier option But if you say, well, it's really not a big deal, then we just have to know that we have to have both kinds of renderers on mUzima.
Yeah, my recommendation would definitely be to standardize on one. Going for a hybrid version with some forms on Zegeba and some forms with something else, I think will be a nightmarish approach.
Yeah, but then if we're going for one, you are proposing to go for the Zegeba renderer, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use the Zegeba designer, I would definitely recommend going also for the Zegeba runner. Otherwise, you'd have to do a lot of translations from this format to another format and back and forth, and suddenly we implement a new feature, and the forms that are created with the new designer no longer works with the other components, and it's a recipe for a headache, and I don't think any of us wants to have that kind of headache.
So you are suggesting all the forms are being generated by using the Zegeba, right?
Yes, definitely. Or automatically, but still into the Zegeba JSON format.
What I understand is that the ones that should be only generated by Zegeba, that's all. That definitely has to be Zegeba, and the other ones which I assume like the simpler one that can also be generated using the Zegeba form. So it would be. I agree with John from development point of view that if we keep both the styles, it's definitely a recipe for disaster. So like we have to like translate everything in Zegeba because that hybrid part that hybrid part will be hard to implement and also hard to maintain because it in that case it will need kind of constant supervision and maintenance. Some maintenance cost would be there. Martin, do you have any question on that? So what John is suggesting, like keep everything in maybe for the form generation part, keep everything in Zegeba. In that way, it will be easier to handle and implement.
Martin just drop off of his connection.
But I think you can also make that decision later on if you want to. It's not a big big question. Yeah. But I think that if we agree that forms that are designed with the Zegeba designer is run with the Zegeba runner, then we're safe. If you also separately want to use some other forms that you have custom made or something, then that's no problem. I mean, it's outside of the scope of using Zegeba anyhow. So, but I think designing in Zegeba and then separately using that to generate a view with some other tool or something is not something I would recommend.
So you are suggesting like if it's developed by Jagged form and then it should be run using Jagged runner. But if it's developed with the mUzima and running under that, not using anything from Zegeba, in that case, it can be considered as under the same domain, just two separate technologies, but no one is interchanging anything from Zegeba to mUzima or mUzima to Zegeba, then it's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because it's just like you make custom code for some purpose, and Of course, we have no no problem with that, and there's a lot of custom code already in mUzima, but I think that the form runner, you should view that as a component that just that you provide a form definition that is designed using the form designer with the library plugin that we now discussed, and some data in a very basic JSON format, and what you get back from it, and then it renders itself, it controls itself, and so on. And once it's done, it passes the data back to you as a JSON document.
So I want to ask about the workflow. So currently, for mUzima native form is, they write in HTML5 with some special tags and then add some JavaScript and things like that. And then we upload to the OpenMS web app site through the mUzima form module. And then there are some, just a very similar way, like creating other OpenMS form, just include their form name, and things like that. And then it would become a mUzima form. And so if we use the Zegeba form designer, so is it the same way that we still upload the same file through mUzima form module? And then the workflow will be the same. Maybe we need to do some a little bit additional work to make sure that there is a form type that is for Zegeba form type, so that on the mUzima form processor side, that they know this is a valid form type, because right now we only check against like the HTML form type. So is it the correct workflow?
Yes, you definitely need to have some way of handling the data coming back, but given that the data is coming from the Zegeba runner as a JSON document, loading that and then handling that information should be straightforward.
Okay, thanks.
So maybe just to clear the air, I think Simon can prepare just a flowchart and showing that how the current mUzima forms and being processed at the back end and coming to the front and back for the client, and if you can show like how that the same thing will be done for the when the forms are created using the Zegeba form and Zegeba runner, then those two flowcharts will clear the confusion, I think.
Yep, very good.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Sorry, Martin, missed your question. What's your question?
No, Simon is going to work on the flowchart for us. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think if you guys work on if we first work on the designer, we figure out all of the pieces that are needed to make that work. Once that's done, then the next step is the runtime, the showing of the form, and how to integrate that together. But I think if we take it step by step, I think we're better off than trying to solve the whole picture immediately.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. This is great.
So the first current task is create that list for the OpenMS library in that structured node format, so that you can use that and see what's happening in for the Zegeba forms, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think that's fine. Any other questions?
Not right now for me.
So I will then complete the standalone designer that we can easily integrate into with the library, and once you're done with the library, we can look at how to make that work together.
Okay. Sounds great.
Hmm.
Okay then, John. I think we understood what we need to do on this side,
Yep,
and
yep. And now let's. I mean, Easter is coming up next week. In Norway, that's pretty low. We only have 3 days of work next week,
Nice.
but and then it's off from Thursday to Monday next week. But so I'd suggest that we catch up, or you let us know once you have a working piece that would use the OpenMRS REST API and that would pull down the concepts and build the node structure using the OL and LI nested structure.
okay.
Because then we can take the next step of making sure that integrates together.
Okay.
And then was it Simon that was going to send a slide set so that we can understand a bit more about the structure?
Yeah. Just maybe keep me in the CC.
Yeah, of course. I think keep everybody on the CC.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
very good.
John,
Well,
thanks for
we're
all
at
the
least
help.
moving in the right direction, so so that's good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye bye. Great
Bye.
talking.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.